And yet today, we have so many leaders and managers adopting Lean, Six Sigma, Lean, and all sorts of variations and combinations of these variables with limited success. Why do you think that is? And what can we as a Deming community say to those companies?
Well, um, another good question. I would say that the people who are adopting lean, agile, operational excellence, Six Sigma quality, zero defects, are, I'd say, they must be achieving success with it. I mean, if it wasn't somehow improving the bottom line,
Mhm.
there wouldn't be success. So I think, so then I have to step back and say, well, they, again, there's a economic reality that they must be finding some value. And what, but on the other hand, I step back and say, when I look at how people are using the lean approach to reduce the number of steps, streamline things.
Without looking at the system.
Yeah, but when my experience, when I see how organizations are, things are strewn about and how haphazard they are, then I'm thinking, I think a lot of organizations would benefit from, organizing the sock drawers and organizing the, I mean, it's like, to me, it's like walking, these organizations that I visit, it's like walking into a kitchen where the silver, some forks are over here, knives are over there, plates are over here, glasses are over here. And so having it organized where the knives, forks, and spoons are next to each other and the glasses are next to each other, and but just some type of organization would go a long way. So what I see in organizations is I think they're getting value out of organizing, um, putting the stapler next to the photocopy machine, but just pretty straightforward stuff. And if anything, I wonder why it took so long to realize that they need not be taking all these steps. Um, so I step back and say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with organizing. But what I don't find they're doing, because it's not part of the framework, they're not focused on how things integrate, meaning how things come together. And let me just share an anecdote that you've seen me present before. And
How they
this is,
fit.
once upon a time, there was an automobile company that whenever they assembled the thousands of parts for an automobile, rubber mallets were used to bang together the mating parts. They didn't quite fit, so rubber mallets were used. But every once in a while in this factory, two parts went together without a mallet, and that company, Ford, okay, called putting things together without a mallet. The term they used was snap fit, as in snap your fingers. That's the framework they used. And what I got of this account was that they not only knew that what they did was now and then snap fit, they also knew, based on benchmarking, buying competitors' cars and taking them apart, that other manufacturers' cars, automobiles assembled the same way. So the evidence in the account, and this is in the book, the author of the book is David Kearns, in the Prophets in the Dark, Prophet, not profit, money profit, but profit as in a wise man. Prophets in the Dark, and in there it tells an account of a senior Xerox executive who earlier in his career ran this Ford plant, and he knew that their products assembled with mallets. Most of the time, he knew that their competitors' cars assembled with mallets. And then they bought a product in this benchmarking expedition and assembled it, never used a mallet. And his comment to the assembly team was, do it again, because this is unheard of. So they took this pickup truck, a part and assembled it twice, never used a mallet. He invited out an executive from Ford to come see this competitor's product. He's never seen anything like it. And he thought, you're going to want to see this. And the senior executive came out, met with the assembly team, heard the details firsthand, and his comment to Frank Pipp, the manager and the team, was that the customer would never notice the difference, meaning never notice the difference between banging it together with mallets and 100% snap fit. So when I present that to people and I say that was when Ford discovered, 100% snap fit pickup truck, and I ask them any guess as to who the pickup truck was made by, and every single time people will say Toyota. I say, yes, it was Toyota. But what's more surprising is I ask them, take a guess at what year that was. And they'll guess the 80s. And I said, no, it's the late 60s. And then I'll ask them, when did Ford first send a team to go visit Japan? And in my research, one of the very first visits by a Ford team to Toyota was in the early 80s, a team led by Larry Sullivan, who was a senior manager within Ford. The reason I mention his name is that in that study mission in Japan, he discovered Dr. Taguchi's work and the idea of not just being anywhere within target, but the idea, as he would in the garage, that what Toyota was doing systematically was in production, producing parts with characteristics that were more than within spec, which is a zero defect mindset. They realized that within specifications, there were ideal values called perhaps a target dimension. And what Sullivan discovered is that their systematic use of target dimensions was improving the quality, was responsible for the higher quality of Toyota products, meaning the higher reliability of Toyota products. And I was aware of that when I heard David Kern's account. So I thought, holy cow, the reason that Toyota products go together so easily is that has to do with Dr. Taguchi's work. And so I share that story as one example in the open literature, the difference between meeting requirements and banging things together, the 100% snap fit Toyota pickup truck, things coming together with, through Larry Sullivan's research, traceability to Dr. Taguchi's work. And then as I looked more into Dr. Taguchi's work, found out that he was working with Toyota back in the 50s. And I thought that became my excitement. So then I was able to take my background in Taguchi, couple it with what I was learning about Deming, and we applied these ideas within Rocketdyne to develop hardware which was 100% snap fit. Not only did it integrate better than anything ever done before, in those particular, some of those case studies, we got permission to publish at Deming conferences and talk about what we were doing generically. And other applications are highly proprietary because the performance gains and savings were so incredible, the company keeps them locked up. So I share all that because, to me, until you look at integration, you really don't understand quality. And integration is when you begin to look at things in a Deming lens as a system. And it's not just that the parts are good, they meet requirements,
but it fits.
What I learned from Taguchi, and Taguchi's work was discovered by Deming a little bit in the 50s, and then predominantly in 1960, Dr. Taguchi was awarded the Deming Prize in Literature for his work on the loss function. And so Dr. Deming, what I found really exciting about the New Economics is, not only does the book end with that quote by Don Wheeler, but the last 2 or 3 pages of chapter 10 of the New Economics is about Dr. Taguchi's work. And so it sealed the deal for me is I was brought to Los Angeles studying bringing Dr. Taguchi's work to Rocketdyne, struggling with why that got turned into why my efforts were predominantly firefighting, hearing about Deming's system of profound knowledge in 1990 and not knowing what to do with it. But after 3 years of extensive firefighting and watching the company lose products because we couldn't solve the problem. So as I got my head around system of profound knowledge, I thought this is ingenious. What an incredible system! And so my explanation as to why the Deming philosophy is so powerful is that it uniquely looks at how things integrate, how things work together by improving how we learn together and think together. And all the other philosophies are are component based, not integration based.
Excellent. I want to take a look uh, into the issues of variation and the differences in decision making and action in addressing common and special causes. As you mentioned just now, there is variation in the white beads, and often people don't look at the need to improve their systems when there's just variation amongst the white beads. So can you tell me how can we best address variation in the white beads and even the variation in the red beads? I understand that there are different approaches in the Deming mindset. Share from your experience. How do we address this?
Well, before talking about that, let me just step back
Hmm.
and and say, so when I ask audiences, when I present to them the red bead experiment, and then ask them the compelling question of, is the we know that the red beads are caused by the system, and is the objective of the Deming philosophy, do they think the objective is to eliminate red beads, end up with all white beads, or and and if that is the pursuit, then what about continuous improvement? And and what'll happen every single time, people will say, well, continuous improvement still works because we can make 100% white beads, but make them cheaper. I said, okay, that is improvement. We can continuously make them cheaper. And then they'll say we could deliver them faster and faster. So, okay, so we've got faster delivery, we've got cheaper, but what about better? Is there a better? So we think of faster is about speed, cheaper is about cost, better is the realm of quality. So then I'll ask them, and I'll say, I know I agree we can improve the cost by lowering it. We can improve the delivery by making it faster. But let's go back to quality. Can we continuously improve the quality? And this is where people get stumped. And so their way out of this riddle is continuous improvement does exist, but it's limited to faster and cheaper. And I can really see how easy it is to get stuck in that rut if you have not studied Dr. Taguchi's work as I have. But what I like to point out to people is that they have everyday examples of managing white bead variation, and that has to do with if they're in a supermarket, and this is an example I learned from Hero Hackaboard in the Deming community, and he presents a scenario where people go into a supermarket, and the premise is, imagine in a supermarket when you're looking at all the fruits and vegetables that none of them are bruised or otherwise physically damaged. And as I frame it, I'll say, imagine you walk into a supermarket, and I show them a picture of a produce section. I said, imagine you've got, the oranges, the apples, the broccoli, the corn, all that stuff out there. And I said, there's no dents, no bruises, no insects. I said, would you expect people under that premise to sort through the fruit? And I mean, the answers are yes and no. So if I ask people, no, they'll say why. They say, well, oranges are oranges, apples are apples. I don't need to sort. But then when people say, yes, they do sort, then I ask for clarification. I say, so why do you sort through the oranges? And the explanation is because some are juicier than others, some are riper than others. Uh, and so going back to your point is what's really cool is to point out to people that they have everyday experience in sorting through the bananas to find the ripest ones, or maybe the unripest ones. Maybe they're looking for ones that are green because they want to use them next week, or they're looking for the juiciest, oranges or the. But what I point out is what's really cool is to point out to people that every day we sort between things that are good. It could be you pull into the parking lot and there's all these parking spots that are all good. What does good mean? It means they aren't being used. So which parking spot do we take? We take one next, where there's no cars nearby, because we don't want, someone to open their door into ours. Or we look at one under the tree, or we look at one next to the door. So I point out that when you pull into a parking lot, before you go into the produce section, you're sorting for the best parking spot with the realization that there's all these parking spots are different. One guy in class, I asked him if he sorts through oranges, and he said, sort through fruit, and he said, no, I don't. And his arms crossed as I got my arms crossed down. He says, no, I don't sort through fruit. And I said, so how do you buy oranges? He said, I buy them by the bag. And I said, do you sort between the bags? And he says, I don't sort. And it's kind of his mindset was, I don't sort, period. So I looked down on his left hand and I said, I see in your left hand a wedding ring. And he said, yes. I said, did you sort? And everyone laughed. So what's cool is instead of explaining to somebody why they should look at things that are good and discover them to be different, what I point out is as many examples as I can of how they already do that. And what's behind that is psychologically, I want them to realize that sorting through the white beads to find, the ideal person you want to date, or to find the ideal parking spot, or the ideal apple, the ideal orange, or it could be you're taking a university course, a calculus class or a geometry class, and there's 5 sections, and you go around asking, which professor you should take it with. What is that saying? It said all the professors are not the same. So what I find powerful is to point out to people that what Deming was talking about in terms of looking through the white beads, the reality of a system where you would find value in looking through the white beads to find the ideal one, and the notion that that ideal one is selected based on what you have in mind for how to use that orange or that parking spot, or the relationship you have in mind with this person you just selected amongst others, is that life is relationship based. We do not go around every day in our personal lives looking at things in isolation. We select things from a systemic perspective. So what I find powerful is to again, instead of saying to people, why should I manage white bead variation? What I like to do is show them that they already do, and then have them, instead of me explaining to you why you should, why don't you explain to me why you do? And then what's
Yeah.
funny is it's hard for them to articulate that because they're not thinking about what they're doing, and they're trying to explain, well, why do I sort through the oranges? And they'll say out of habit. And I said, it's not out of habit. So the reason you sort through the oranges is that you're looking for the juicy one. So what is, even when I'm trying to point out to people their existing behaviors and sorting through the white beads, it's hard for them to articulate that that's what they're doing. Now, I give them an
Mm.
explanation, and they're like, yes, but it's hard for them to articulate that that's actually what we're doing. And so I'd say what Deming is doing is giving us a framework and a vocabulary to explain our behaviors,
To raise our consciousness and our
to raise
thinking.
our consciousness. So that became the major part of my effort in the early 90s at Rocketdyne was how do we raise consciousness that managing white bead variation is a skill we have in our personal lives? And then how
Mm-hmm.
do we make that a skill within the organization, which is accustomed to what Akoff is talking about, breaking things into parts, manage the parts as well as possible, label them good by some conformance to requirements structure. So in a work setting, you learn to manage the parts taken separately. So the strategy was to point out to people that at home they manage things with a great appreciation of what I would refer to as contextual excellence. They're looking at
Mm-hmm.
things in the system, but when they go to work, they fall into the mode of compliance excellence and do these parts comply to a set of requirements. And so the strategy has been to point out that the same person at work and at home operate differently, and then point out to them my explanation, the reason they operate differently, because at home they're unknowingly thinking, they're unknowingly managing things with context, even though they're not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And at work, they're managing parts, even though they're not thinking about it. So the awareness piece you just alluded to is to give them a consciousness, and that's the consciousness I learned from Deming, that these things are a natural way of looking at things, because life is about relationships. Life is not a bunch of parts.
Okay. But from
And
your experience,